This is the Used Car Dealer Podcast.
Zach here, back after summer break in another episode of the Used Car Dealer Podcast. And today we have Jim Maguire, Experian Senior Director of Product Marketing for Automotive. And we're going to discuss dealership fraud, ways to prevent it at your store, and Experian's latest report on fraud in the industry. So Jim, to kind of get things started, talk about your background in the industry and what led you to Experian.
So nice to meet you, Zach. I've watched your podcast in the past and really enjoyed it. So my background, it all started with the internet, right? So I was working at an internet development company back when it was a new thing. And I was hired by a company called ADP Dealer Services to start a product. That product became autotrader.com. And so I jumped right in. I started at the end of 1995, presented at NADA 1996, and I've been in the auto industry ever since, and really been focused on e-commerce. After I left there, I went to, I'm in Chicago, so another local player. I went to go help launch cars.com. So I've been doing automotive e-commerce since it was a thing, and have been working with dealers and OEMs and lenders that entire time, building products and bringing them to market.
Wow, it sounds like you've been at the ground floor of a lot of really interesting, important kind of auto software companies, e-commerce companies in the space. And I wanted to throw out an icebreaker for you. Tell us about the first car you ever got, whether that was in high school or college or later in life.
Oh, it was in high school, and I was able to have the pleasure of driving my family's 1977 Chevy Malibu Classic station wagon. It was light blue with wood paneling on the sides, and it was enormous. I once drove 10 high school friends in that car to a concert. It was a big one.
Very cool. And let's kind of kick off. And I want to ask you about what are the most common forms in the auto industry for fraud at dealerships, and what should people in the industry working at the store, what should they look out for and be aware of?
Well, things are changing very quickly in the universe, but fraud's been around in the auto space for a long time, right? We've all sat across the desk and looked at paperwork and seen, hey, does this match up or not? And back in the day, the mandate was to start running red flags reports. Like that was the very first mandated fraud activity that was not just policy, but it became regulations and law. That still is the most basic thing you can do. But from that, sitting across the desk from someone, looking at their ID, looking at them, checking out the paperwork, finding out, as you go through the process, more about that person, that has transformed because of e-commerce, right? So more and more, we're trying to pull this process online to start it up front, to make that a great experience for a consumer, and to make it as frictionless as possible, because we know the more that we can get done up front, the more likely they're going to have a good experience on the back end. They may not make all the same decisions, I want this, but when they get to the lot, turns out they want that, and that's to be expected. But it's a way for dealers to compete now, to be able to offer that good experience. Unfortunately, we're also competing with other dynamics. We're competing with the fact that fraudsters are out there, just as they always have been, but now they have the tools on the other side to try to engage with dealers online. And we have to be very careful of that, because instead of one person at a time walking into your dealership, a fraudster can hit a button on their computer and suddenly send out 100 pieces of information to 100 dealers. So just the law of big numbers makes it more challenging. So it's really important to be looking for the different types of frauds. And they're very similar kinds of frauds, some of them that we've always known. There's vehicle fraud. Does this person own the vehicle? Are they representing the vehicle appropriately? Does the history show anything bad about it? Is there still a lien on that car? Those basic vehicle fraud things. For the consumer side, there's 100 different ways they can misrepresent themselves, and they always have, whether it's this is what my salary is, or my job title, or how long I've worked someplace. Yes, I own a home, or whatever it happens to be. And of course, a credit report gets a lot of that good information to help you understand that consumer in depth and look at them the same way that a lender would look at them. Because that's, quite often, most often people are financing vehicles. And so that's really important to have a consistent view. But now we've got new challenges, right? Because people are starting it online, and not only are they starting it, but the number one fastest growing type of fraud is identity fraud, and it's synthetic identity fraud in particular. So it's not just, oh, I've got someone's information, that I stole, which is still identity fraud. In this case, it's, oh, I've got a piece of information from this identity, and another piece from this one. And these are all valid pieces of information that check out individually. And they put them all together to create this synthetic identity, this Frankenstein identity of all these different piece parts that if you don't have the right tools, each of the individual pieces check out, but they don't all check out for that person. So that's the number one thing that dealers are encountering today.
And could you explain some of the pain points, not just dealers, but also lenders, and what their experience when it comes to fraud in the auto industry?
Well, we all know that prices have gone up. And so any given transaction represents a pretty big investment on behalf of the dealer and then on behalf of the lender when they go to finance it. So someone taking the keys and driving off and not making that first payment, that's a real pain point for everyone involved, dealers in particular, on that first payment fraud default. So that today, even a used vehicle could be over $100,000, right? So it is a sincere concern. It always has been an issue, right? But now there's big dollars at stake. When you start to add that up over the course of a portfolio, if you're a smaller dealer, it's meaningful to you because that's a percentage of your revenue. If you're the bigger your group is, the bigger the dollar amount is that you're at risk. If you're a lender and you're managing a portfolio across hundreds or thousands of dealers, the risk is enormous. So everyone's got a vested interest in accuracy and having the confidence around this. And what's so interesting is we've just launched a research study that shows that businesses are confident in their ability to fight fraud. And yet, when you dig in, so 70% of them say that they're confident in their ability to spot fraud in their business. When you dig in a little bit, only 45% of them actually can quantify the impact fraud is having on their business. So a lot of confidence, and yet not a lot of information. And maybe part of the reason that they're not, that they are so confident is because they don't understand, the level of fraud that's going on.
And why are dealers and lenders more vulnerable to fraud as digital retailing continues to evolve in our industry?
So, there's that famous quote from John Dillinger about why does he rob banks? Because that's where the money is. So in this case, a car is worth a lot, right? One car is worth an awful lot. So me scamming, Amazon for an order is very different than me driving away with a new SUV. So we're at risk because of, it's the second largest purchase decision the average consumer makes is a vehicle, after a home. So that's number one, the size of it. And then number two, we're trying to do the best job servicing these customers that we possibly can, and making that online experience as seamless as possible is a goal. And it's a way that we're competing, right? I mean, in the used car business, the absolute biggest players, Carvana as an example, they're moving it all online. And if I'm trying to compete with them, I need to be able to have tools to have a good customer experience, as an example. So the more it moves online, the more there's an opportunity for mischief, if you will, if you don't have the right tools in place. Because if you do, the more things can be digital, the more you can take some of the human element out of it and have the digital solutions to help you look for fraud, identify issues. And that's where businesses are definitely investing.
And how can dealers and lenders avoid a potential identity theft situation? Very common form of fraud.
Sure. Well, again, that most basic thing that we talked about is red flags reporting, right? So that's something that whenever you pull someone's credit and you go through the process, red flags are part of it. Does this make sense? Each dealer, each entity in the process, the lender as well, right? They all have their own thresholds for risk and what they're willing to invest in. We recommend a multi-layered approach where you have solutions along the different steps in the path that are appropriate for the level of risk at that stage in the customer journey. If someone's looking for a vehicle on your website just to find out about it, you're not going to be grilling them about who they are, signed in to look at vehicles. We don't do that. But the next step of, I'd like a quote. Well, to verify that person's identity in that process, along that path, it is a little bit of science. It's certainly science, but when you do it is the art, right? Because you don't want to make it too hard for them to learn about the vehicles that you're merchandising. So if you'd like a customized quote and you want to understand what your monthly payment might be, which is becoming increasingly common and an expectation of consumers, then you need to share a little bit of your information. And as a consumer, we're willing to make that trade-off, right? And we are becoming more comfortable with sharing data. In fact, that's one of the very interesting things that our recent research showed was that consumers' appetite, their expectation for data security is driving a lot of the opportunities for us to make this better for everyone, because consumers know that there's fraud in the world. They're 68% are very concerned about it. They know that there are people they're doing business with online have a role in helping to protect their information, and they have an expectation that they're doing that. They also know that in order to verify who they are in that process, as they get deeper into the customer journey, the purchase journey, they need to share information appropriately. So consumers, as an example, are more comfortable now. They believe that biometric security is the single most secure way of conducting business online. And it's because we're all becoming used with it. Put your thumbprint on your phone, right. use a picture of your face. So by doing that again and again, they believe they've learned that that's valid. So there's a high percentage of consumers that believe that that's the case, the majority of them. Unfortunately, on the business side, we see only about a little over a third of businesses have invested in that biometric security. And so there's physical biometrics, like I just talked about, and they're very tangible to a consumer. And I would say if we had this conversation 5 years ago, and in fact, I know that this is the case because we did a survey 5 years ago, consumers were less open to that biometric approach. Now, because the world has gone that way, they're much more comfortable with it. So businesses can invest in basic fraud solutions, and they can also invest in more sophisticated ones because the public is ready for them and appreciate them when they're installed and rolled out.
Definitely agree. And Experian, they recently released the 2023 U.S. Identity and Fraud Report. Tell us a little bit about that report for the auto industry, and what are some of the key takeaways in this report?
Sure. Well, so the report is industry is agnostic, right? So it's across the entire world, because consumers and businesses, we're living in this ecosystem that's set about our, based on our e-commerce activity, electronic activity, every single day. And so, auto is not unique in that regard. People have expectations about security, and businesses have needs for security across the way. So we talked with 2,000 consumers, we talked with hundreds of businesses to get their approaches and their strategy. And the number one takeaway is that fraud is shifting based on what both the consumers and businesses are telling us. Fraudsters are getting more sophisticated. They're taking new tactics that no one has ever seen before to try to take advantage of consumers and businesses. And as a result, the things that were helping you yesterday, still important, but you need to protect yourself with new approaches. So on the business side, we see that there's a lot of awareness that fraud is an issue. There's not necessarily the alignment on how to move forward. What the most advanced businesses are doing are finding solutions that use machine learning. And the reason they do that is because machine learning can spot new patterns across all the different transactions to identify new types of fraud that we've never seen before. So, the tools and the models, the statistical models that were evaluating fraud in the past, really good at how things worked previously and getting better, no doubt. But the new fraud is where suddenly a new approach can take someone unawares, and before you catch on to what's going on, you've suddenly lost quite a bit. So that's on the business side. On the consumer side, there's a high awareness of fraud, a lot of concern about it, but a new appreciation or expectation that the businesses they're working with are going to be looking out for their personal data and safeguarding it on their behalf. And that when a business doesn't do that, consumers are very willing to walk away. It can be an overriding experience that drives them away from doing business with that vendor that they might have been working with for many years, but they just lost trust that that vendor is a business is helping them be safe, and it's becoming more and more of an issue. And this idea that synthetic identities are the overriding new kind of fraud that we're seeing is something that is proven out statistically, not just in what we see going through our systems, but as reported in this report, our 2023 Identity and Fraud Report. It is a giant issue. Even the Federal Trade Commission identified it as the fastest growing type of fraud in this past year. So how those Frankenstein identities are put together is becoming more and more sophisticated, more and more opportunities. So the study itself shows that both consumers and businesses have a vested interest that applying the right tools throughout the process is important. It's also, we've talked about making it a good customer experience. Customers appreciate it when businesses recognize them online. When they come in, the experience that they had, they looked at 5 different cars. If there's a way to identify that that's the same person, and these are the 5 cars you looked at last time, or here's the information we remember about you from last time, as long as it's presented in a safe, secure way, where it's not necessarily just based on a cookie, but based on the consumer volunteering that this is my information, where it's a two-way street, then it's a win-win.
So what has been most surprising to you about 2023 from your lens at Experian?
So that growth in fraud is, I guess, not surprising because the trend's been there, but it just continues to grow. The number of consumers that are impacted by it, the number of incidents that we see. But the other surprising thing, I guess it makes sense if you think about it. When dealers or lenders put these fraud solutions in place where it's obvious that they're looking for information along the way, it almost has the same effect of that alarm company sign that you put in your front yard. People know that there's someone watching, and just that knowledge that that's happening can actually deter folks, deter fraudsters. It's a delicate balance. There's a lot of fraud review that can be done in the background. right? We talked about physical biometrics. Take a picture of yourself as an example. It's becoming more and more common, right? Take a picture of your driver's license, take a selfie rather, and the system compares the two. So that's physical. It's very obvious to a consumer. There's also things like behavioral biometrics. So we're getting way more sophisticated now, where there's solutions where you can look at speech patterns or even keystroke dynamics.
Wow.
Can a human type that fast, to fill out that application? Signature analysis, so there's behavioral biometrics that are not as obvious, obviously, to a consumer, but those sorts of things really have a place in the world now. Again, if I'm a fraudster and I can hit a button and send out 100 applications at once, on the other side, you need to be able to detect that. This can't be a person based on the way that they're typing. No normal person types exactly in that cadence, right? Just as an example. So that's, as a business, if as a dealership, I need to figure out, what my appetite is for investing in fraud avoidance. And honestly, it's like anything else. It takes a string of bad experiences, and suddenly people are very interested. It'd be better to be proactive and hit it up front. But quite often I've had an issue, I've learned my lesson, now I need to go make an investment.
Very true. So my next question, what automotive features, and I define automotive features as like digital retail, EV tech, autonomous tech, are you most excited about?
So all those things are interesting. At Experian, we're a data company, and each one of those things has data associated with it. And the data can be used for preventing fraud, like we're talking about. The data can be used for optimizing business, right? Whether it's I have a better understanding of the dynamics of my marketplace or of my customer base, a better understanding of the people I'm doing business with. So the data that's associated with all those sort of forward-looking things, and that includes vehicle data, connected car data, right? That is the part that we're most excited about. At every step of the way, we're going to be able to do a better job of understanding what's going on in the marketplace, going on with your customers, going on with their interactions with their vehicles, and then also predicting, right? We're all about trying to figure out what's going to happen next. So who's likely to buy a vehicle next, or who's likely to have a need? How can I better service this customer along the way? So that aspect is very exciting to me in the army of data scientists that we have here at Experian Automotive.
So, Jim, if you were a small to mid-sized used car dealer and you were looking to protect your dealership from fraud after listening to this podcast, and we're definitely going to link the Experian report in this as well, what would be your next steps?
So my next steps as a dealer would be to talk to the trusted dealer service providers I'm working with today. I'm going to talk to my F&I systems provider. I'm going to talk to my DMS provider. I'm going to talk to my companies that are providing me with either credit reports or with other security solutions. My company that's providing my dealer website. I'm going to talk with all of them. And I'm going to understand from their perspective what solutions can they bring to the table, because fraud is such an overarching trend that all of them have a piece of the puzzle to bring to the table. And that multi-layered approach that I talked about is this is how you achieve it, right? So your dealer service providers that you're working with today have solutions that can help you along the way. Now, you don't want to pay for the same solution 3 different times from 3 different providers, right? So you want to make sure you understand how they work together. And then the questions you want to ask them are things, along the lines of, how seamless will this be in my workflow? So it's going to help people not only protect everyone, but is it going to help us get through the transaction process more easily? You'll want to ask them about where the data is stored and how it's managed, and make sure that you're comfortable, because obviously dealers have their own obligations for protecting data, which are now regulated more recently than ever. And you'll want to understand if those solutions are taking advantage of advanced technologies. The average dealer is not going to go spin up an AI solution on their own to go figure out if fraud trends in their dealership, but the people they're working with are. Right. So talk to them. Are they using machine learning? Are they using as a way the tools to identify new trends as they come? So you're not just preparing for the issues you have today, but you're future proofing for those issues down the road.
And lastly, Jim, can you give us an idea of what's coming down the pipeline from Experian and yourself for the rest of 2023?
Well, as you can imagine, Experian's very focused on keeping everyone's data safe and secure. So we have, and we do that with solutions directly with the industry, and also, we provide data and services to half the technology companies that are out there working in the auto industry today. So there's definitely opportunities for us to figure out better ways to get our solutions embedded in the dealer with the dealer service providers that everyone's working with today. So that's a big focus. Next, we're looking at new ways to identify fraud. And to do it in a way that is seamless in the process, and is transparent to the extent that it needs to be for everyone, and compliant, of course. Right? There's a lot of questions that we get. We're always reviewing it through a security lens and through a compliance lens. So we want to keep everyone safe, secure, and good with the regulators.
Well, Jim, it's been an awesome pleasure to have you on this episode to talk about automotive fraud. I feel a lot more knowledgeable after this conversation, and I'm sure our listeners will as well. So thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Zach, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and your listeners.